But I had this like voice in my head that sort of kept asking, like, what next? What do you do with your life if early mid 30s and you don't want to follow that traditional path around family and work for the rest of your life? All of a sudden I had this idea, so I'm going to buy a camper van.
Hello to all the dreamers and risk takers out there. Wannabes, I see you too, and I got you. This is the Vereless N podcast, where we help people take risks, overcome fears, and experience freedom. Hi, I'm Heather, the host of this podcast. I'm also a risk taker, adventurer, vanlifer, world traveler, business owner, Enneagram 9 peacemaker, student in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, connector, daughter of Christ, and encourager to all the dreamers and wannabes out there. This is the Vereless N podcast, and we have meaningful conversations with people who took risks in pursuit of their dreams to discover how they did it. Whether they've started a business, traveled solo, moved to a new state or country, chose an alternative lifestyle, or started a new hobby, these people have one thing in common. They decided their dreams were bigger than their fears. Hey guys, welcome to the Vereless N podcast. This is your host, Heather. I'm so excited to be here with my friend Lisa. She lives in New Zealand and we've just been friends for a while now. Lisa's an author. She's a van lifer, one of my inspirations, podcaster. She's a German expat living in New Zealand, kite surfer. She stand-up paddleboards. She's recently gotten into hiking. She's a business owner. And she's just an all-around awesome, friendly person. I'm so excited to have Lisa on my podcast. She recently had me on hers. Lisa, hey, how's it going?
Hi, Heather. I'm good. How are you going?
I'm good. Oh, it's so nice to have this chat with you. You're in New Zealand right now, and it's great.
Totally. Thanks for having me. And what an awesome introduction. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Well, you're awesome, so you deserve it. I always love telling the story of how I met people that are on my podcast, because usually these stories are pretty awesome and random. I don't know. I like to make friends with everybody, so everybody always has a good story. So I'll tell you how I met Lisa. One of my best friends from college, Robbie, he lives in New Zealand, is friends with Lisa. They used to work together, and he got married in New Zealand, invited me down there. And when somebody invites you to New Zealand, you just can't say no. Just don't do it. So went there to what they called their summer camp wedding, and it was epic. Rented out a whole hostel, and that's where all the guests stayed. And Lisa and I were two of probably the only single ladies there, and just made super fast friends with each other. So we spent Christmas together, New Year's, and then after the wedding, summer camp was over, she invited me to do a road trip with her to Ahipara. So we just kind of explored New Zealand, camped out. I ended up staying in New Zealand for 3 months, and Lisa just became one of my best friends while I was there, and we did a lot of exploring together. At that time, she was living in an apartment or house with a couple other people, and her dreams started to happen, and she started to think about, oh, what should I do? I kind of don't want to be in this 9 to 5 rut anymore. And so, yeah, Lisa, tell me about that dream that was brewing in your head while we were having the most epic summer in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's so funny because I actually sort of did meet you like that summer that sort of everything kind of started for me. So we had this most amazing epic summer in New Zealand, and then summer kind of came to an end, and I always get the, end of summer blues. I'm one of those people whose mood is like heavily dependent on the weather. But yeah, that year somehow the end of summer blues was a bit darker than it usually is. And I just sort of was at this point in my life where everything was like awesome. I had this amazing summer. I had really awesome friends. I had all these hobbies and activities that I loved. And I am someone who sort of, it just took me a little bit longer to figure all of that stuff out. So I was really appreciative of it because it hadn't always been that way for me. And I had a great job that I really enjoyed. and all that stuff. So on paper, like, life was awesome, but I had this, like, voice in my head that sort of kept asking, like, "What next?" You know, what's the rest of your life look like? Like, what are you gonna do for the next, 30 years? And of course, like, at the time, I was, I think, 33 or 32, so, everyone around me was doing the getting married, having kids, buying houses, sort of stuff, and it was really awesome to see. Like, I loved, seeing all my friends having that experience and being so happy, but it just wasn't really what sort of resonated with me. It just wasn't really what I wanted to do with my life, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life either. And so that kind of what started it all, just that sort of question of, okay, what do you do with your life if you, early mid 30s and you don't want to follow that traditional path around family and work for the rest of your life?
Yeah, gosh, I've had that question pop up so many times. Usually my answer is just go to New Zealand and figure it out. But you already live there. So have you always been a dreamer or risk taker?
It's such an interesting question. And I was thinking about this, right? And have I always been a dreamer? Yes, absolutely. I've always been someone who had like very rich inner world and had, dreams and ideas and stuff in her mind. But for a long time, I wasn't a doer. So I had all these dreams and I didn't do anything about it. I let self doubt and insecurities and fear and all that stuff hold me back. So they were just dreams. To be fair, it's probably been a journey that I've been on for about a decade and a half now. So, change doesn't happen overnight. But I've sort of now am someone who tries to do something about her dreams and makes them, reality, at least some of them. So that part's new. Am I a risk taker? To be honest, and I know a lot of people who sort of see my life would say that I am a risk taker. I don't think I am. I think I'm actually someone who take like very calculated risks. I always have a backup plan. I always am very sort of considerate and careful in my decisions. And I am someone who thinks things through rather than just sort of jumping in and figuring things out on the way.
Yeah, I think that question is it's sort of like a tricky question to answer because people on the outside tend to think that you are a risk taker, right? You had this dream and you made it happen. Now you're living van life in New Zealand and have been for a few years. And but to you, you don't think it's a risk. You planned it out. You just made your dream happen. So I always like to hear that because yeah, a lot of the times I don't think I'm taking any risks
Mm.
when I make decisions, but that's just because it was small steps along the way, that sort of made it happen.
Yeah, and I think it's such an important message actually that, for people who kind of want to make that sort of change in their life, but feel like they're not the type for it. I'm not the just jump in kind of type. Well, you don't have to be. You can do these sort of adventurous things, whether you're a risk taker or not. You just do it your way. And for me, my way means having a plan, being sensible, having financial security and those sort of things. And for someone else, it means just jump and have the time of your life and figure things out. So yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody can approach dreams in different ways and
Hmm.
still make them happen. There's not just one way to just chase after them, right? So, your dream that transpired after that summer, tell me about that. You decided you wanted to live van life? Like when you decided that the regular life of all your friends wasn't really calling you?
Yeah. So it's kind of like a weirdly sort of random thing. What I really wanted was a break. I had like worked super hard, done really well career wise, but I sort of was just feeling like I needed to step away from that and figure out who I am when I'm not working 40, 50 hours a week. And so that's kind of how it started. And then I don't actually know where the idea to live in a van came from. It was just one of those things that was suddenly there. And you know how when you have an idea and it like within, like 5 minutes, it turns from an idea into a plan and you just know this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And that's what it was
Yes,
like.
yes.
Because at that point, I had like cycled through a bunch of ideas. Go traveling overseas, change my job, do this, do that, change the color of my hair, whatever, Sort of I had like considered a bunch of options and nothing really sort of felt right. And then all of a sudden I had this idea, so I'm going to buy a camper van. Original idea sort of wasn't necessarily to like permanently live in the van, but to take a summer off and go travel in the van. So that's how it started. It was just meant to be for a summer. But yeah, the idea was just there, and I was just like, yep, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
Let's
because
go.
that summer too, it was all about chasing the surf or chasing the wind, a lot of environmental conditions because that's what it's like in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Everyone's in the water and you do what the environment is telling you is right at that moment. So that's what we did that summer. And that's what you did on the weekends. So that was probably just a natural, well, I want to be able to go to these places easier. And living in a van, you can just camp out there overnight, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I mean, New Zealand is just like such a incredible country to travel and see, and you just don't run out of places to visit. So that was a big part of it as well. I live in this amazing country. I want to, experience it and really have the time to see it. And so yeah, so that was that's kind of how it kind of came to happen. And before I knew it, I'd bought a van and I was doing it.
Yes, I love it. Lisa, you studied in New Zealand before you moved there permanently. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how I came to New Zealand. So I was 22, about to turn 23 at the time, and I was studying in Germany and was just doing an, study abroad kind of year, like you do. And I happened to end up in New Zealand for that and just like loved New Zealand right away. And it wasn't for a few years after that that I sort of became a permanent thing. In the beginning, it was just I'm going to stay another semester, and then actually I went traveling overseas for a bit, but then I'm going to come back and do my master's in New Zealand. And then by the time I was done with that, I had been here for more than 2 years. And I sort of, well, I had, some good connections. So I might as well find a job here and start working. And then so over time, I kind of extended it over and over again. And now New Zealand's home. I'm not going anywhere. This is the best place in the world. And they're going to have to kick me out if they want to get rid of me.
Yeah. And do you have your residency?
Yes, I'm a permanent resident in New Zealand, which is sort of the next best thing to being a citizen. Unfortunately, Germany makes it really hard for you to have dual citizenship. So if I want to become a New Zealand citizen, I kind of have to give up my German passport, and it's a lot of hassle, it costs a lot of money, and it hasn't really been worth it yet just to have an actual New Zealand passport.
Yeah.
Seems to be a lot of effort. But
Yeah.
yeah,
To
I can
officially be a Kiwi.
yeah, yeah.
Well, first of all, I love how all the doors just kind of opened for you to stay. It's typically how it happens, right? A lot of times things aren't planned out. It's just, oh, this looks good. Oh, this looks good. Oh, I've been here this long. I love it here. I'm not going anywhere. When you came to study, do you think your personality has changed in any way since arriving in New Zealand to now living there? Because I know for me, studying abroad was a huge moment in my life where I realized how amazing it is to be independent and to be on my own. And that's where I really just kind of grew into who I was as this outgoing person that's just going to make friends with everybody. It all started when I was probably like that as a kid, but it just took it to the next level when I was in Australia studying abroad. Did you have a similar experience with your personality just kind of coming into your own?
Oh, absolutely. Though probably in quite I don't know, a different way, probably a much slower way. So I think for me, coming to New Zealand sort of kick-started something, but it took a number of years before it really turned into that massive change. But I am today a completely different person than I was when I left Germany. Quite frankly, I just wasn't a very happy person in Germany for, no like obvious reasons, but I just wasn't happy with who I was, a lot of self-doubts, and was very overweight, and sort of let that stop me from being who I wanted to be and live the kind of life that I wanted to live, and all that sort of stuff. And I think, what coming to New Zealand did as a sort of starting point was that blank page. You kind of get a fresh start. You come into an environment where nobody knows you, but also there's actually something quite freeing about being surrounded by people who, most of them will only be a part of your life for 6 months or a year. You're sort of, the pressure is different. I still remember that. You're not surrounded by people who will most likely be a part of your life long term. So there isn't as much, will they like me? Won't they like me? How do I have to act, and what do I have to do? And and all that stuff. So I still remember that being quite freeing, just sort of having that opportunity, a fresh start, and yeah, just sort of short term perspective. When I think about it now, it's sort of that's when the ball kind of started rolling. And then it was rolling in slow motion for a number of years and kind of was building up momentum. But, a real actually, what I consider sort of the turning point in my life was a university course that I did here in my second semester, Management 723 Professional Development, the only name and number I remember from my university years.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wow, that's pretty impressive. What was your professor's name?
Dr. Deb Shepherd. I'm still in touch with her. We still catch up occasionally. Yeah,
Nice,
so
nice.
that was, the course was called professional development, but it was as much personal development as it was professional. And that was my introduction to this whole concept of learning about yourself and, your personality, your strengths and weaknesses, your values, the whole idea of your attitude and your mindset, and that you actually have control over that. That I do believe that there's things about personality you can't change. We are who we are, but there is a lot that you can change. And sort of that introduced me to that idea to actually look inward and learn about who I am, who I want to be, and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, that's my turning point in life, that kind of starting that self-awareness journey. And then there were a bunch of, other things that follow. Like I, joined a student organization that was really awesome and kind of gave me a lot of confidence. And then I managed to lose a lot of weight over a number of years, which then enabled me to start doing a lot of the things that I've always been wanting to do. Like I ran a half marathon. Well, I walked a half marathon, most of it. I ran a little bit, but did that and then got into kite surfing and, these sort of things that I had never thought I could do ever, and was always like letting fear and doubt hold myself back. But then, because of some really positive experience I had, I was sort of a lot more confident, and that's when I started to live the life that I've always wanted to live. And that's when I started from being just a dreamer to being a dreamer and a doer and making things happen for myself. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. It's so awesome that you're able to pinpoint that and
Mm.
remember what happened in that class. You said that you were talking about personal values and things like that. What would you say your core values are? That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's been a big part of my life. I guess what you would call sort of self development or personal growth, and learning about that and values. And my highest personal values are about freedom, flexibility, independence, but at the same time, security. And it's been a bit of a mind fuck, to be honest, and something that I've really struggled with at times, to have, personal values that are in conflict of each other a lot of the time. On the one hand, there's a part of me that wants to, earn more money and save and, have a secure future. And I'm really bad at dealing with uncertainty. I like to know what happens, what's going to happen next. And on the other hand, I love freedom and adventure and independence. So yeah, I'm still, balancing the two. I think I'm getting better at it, hopefully. But yeah, so that's my highest values.
That definitely aligns with living van life because it gives you the freedom, the flexibility, the ability to save money, not paying for rent at a place you don't own. And yeah, that's really cool. And also, one other thing that you mentioned that I totally agree with, moving to a new place, like you get to start over. It's a little daunting, but when you start to meet new people, like they don't know anything about you. There's no ties. You can make friends with whoever, get involved with whatever, and it's is such a empowering and freeing experience to be able to do that,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. These people are all just, temporarily in your life. So, who cares if you make a fool of yourself? In a year's time, we all go back to our home countries. And, if you don't want to, you never see any of them ever again. So, yeah, absolutely.
And you probably made friends with people during that time who proved to be a true friend, and maybe you're still in touch with now or connected you with somebody else who is prominent person in your life
Yeah,
currently still, right?
absolutely. I mean, to be fair, I'm not really like regularly in touch with people, but I do still, have really fond memories of some of the people. And thanks to, Facebook these days and those sort of things, you're still in touch. You kind of, still know what the others are doing with their lives. And funnily enough, some of them have since sort of come back to New Zealand for visits, some of them with their families. So we've, met up again, which, yeah, it's been really cool to see as well. It's been 14 years, so it's been a while.
Can't believe it. Gosh, the time flies when you're having fun, right?
Tell me about it.
Okay, so let's talk about getting into van life. So you told me what sort of motivated you to start. You were just not wanting to do what culture tells us we should do. And you wanted to try something new. So, like, what were your goals with starting van life? Was it to surf more? You said you were just wanting to take a break, but did you have specific goals that you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah, I did. I'm not sure if goal is the right word. I've always, since before I've been, doing this sort of lifestyle, always been a believer that if you want change, you got to create space for it. And you got to create an opportunity for it, especially if you're anything like I was before. I was living a really busy life, like working lots and then doing, activities and stuff on the weekends. And there was just no space for anything new to come into my life. So that was kind of
Yeah.
my main kind of goal, is to create that space and just to, I guess, in a way, see what happens if there is time for new stuff to
Yeah.
come. And I did, sort of wanted to, at the time I was really motivated to learn to surf. I've kind of, put that dream on hold a little bit since, but, so I had those sort of goals, and I wanted to see certain parts of the country that I hadn't been to. So there was those sort of, more specific goals, but on a whole, it was really just, I wanted to create space and just see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. It's so true. Just start with creating space. And how did you plan for the transition from renting to, I'm assuming you bought the van? Yeah, how'd you plan? Did you do research on what it's like to live in a van? How did you start?
I was so naive, just kind of chaotic about it. But I decided to do this, and I kind of kept it quiet initially. I just told people I'm buying a van to, travel on weekends and just sort of, ease my way into it. So I bought the van, and I think it would have been like August or September time frame. It was on the South Island, and I was up in Auckland in the North Island. So I flew down to Christchurch to pick up this van and drove it up. So that was my first van experience.
So you found it online?
Yeah, I found it online,
Okay.
had a, local mechanic check it out, but bought it without having seen it. So, that was the first thing. And I literally like knew nothing about vans. I'd never even been in one before. I'd done a caravan trip before. So I
Okay,
did.
right. Yeah, because you traveled with your sister on the South Island,
Yeah, that
right?
was like
Before you
yeah,
actually bought
that
the
was like
van?
a year and a half before I bought the van. Yeah, we had this caravan trip on the South Island, but yeah, never, been in a camper van before. Had like no idea. So just sort of liked this one, bought it, flew down.
What did you like about it? What appealed to you about that one specific
There
van?
were a few things, because even though I was sort of, not officially saying it at the time, I already knew that I probably want to live in it for quite a while. So things like being able to stand up in it was really important to me. And I'm quite tall, so that meant it had to be a high roof one. In New Zealand, we have this standard that's called certified self-contained, which basically means that you have everything on board you need, like your toilet, your wastewater, your fresh water, your rubbish, all that sort of stuff. So you can stay somewhere without leaving a mark on the environment, so to say. So, and you need that to freedom camp in a lot of spaces, a lot of areas. So that was one thing that was really important to me. And then what I really liked about that one, and actually that was my first van, so I'm now on my second one. We can tell that story later if
That
you
was
want.
was that one
Yeah,
Josie?
Josie was the
Her name
first
was
one. The
Josie?
second one never really got a name. It's just called the van.
Josie 2.0?
Yeah, so those sort of things. One thing that was really important to me was that you can walk through from the back to the driver's seat, because for safety reasons, if I'm ever somewhere at night and something kind of doesn't feel right, I like the idea that I can just get from my bed into the driver's seat and take off, be out of there. So I had those sort of things. But yeah, other than that, I really liked that it was an automatic, which is quite rare to find, like in in New Zealand, those older vans, what I could afford at the time. Yeah, so that was kind of, the criteria, which was, honestly, like I look back now and I was like, why did I not do more research? Why did I not talk to some people or like check out some vans or just do online research to kind of learn more about the pros and cons of different vans and all that stuff, because that first van that I bought eventually a year and a half later had to be written off because of rust, and it's quite a common issue. So if I had done a bit more research, I probably would have known to look for it and get it checked. But yeah, some things you got to learn the hard way. So yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me about that, and I was just so sad for you. Your home was basically falling out the bottom,
Pretty
right?
much, yeah.
So sad.
The mechanic kicked it and a piece fell off. So yeah.
Oh my
So one
goodness.
piece of advice that I have for everyone else: do some research before you buy your van.
Yeah, if you're living in a place or looking to buy a van that's spent a lot of time near the
Yeah.
ocean, salt leads to rust, and that can lead to your van falling
Pretty
apart.
much. Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. But other than that, I honestly, this is how naive I was. So I picked up this van from these ladies in Christchurch that bought it off, and I drove, and it was like August or September, I can't quite remember. And that's still quite cold on the South Island, right? So I drove to halfway up the South Island to this little place called Murchison and parked up for the night. And I'd bought a van that had a heater. So it's great. I'm going to turn the heater on. I turn the heater on. Nothing's happening. And I tried a few different things and eventually end up calling these two ladies that I'd bought it off. And I said, the heater isn't working. And so she's like, oh, have you tried this and tried that? And I was like, yeah. And then eventually, turns out that this van had an electric heater that only works when you're connected to power, which is very different to, like a gas heater that I have now, which runs off gas. But like, that's how little I knew about camper vans. I'd bought a van with a heater, so I just assumed that the heater would work no matter
Yeah, they're
where I
probably
am.
like, "Is your van plugged in?"
Yeah. Like after 5 minutes of back and forth, it's, have you checked the plug is properly plugged in? And I was like, what plug? And the power cable at the campground. It's like, I'm not at a
You're like, "I'm
campground.
freedom camping."
So they must have been like, how stupid is this girl?
Oh my gosh, yeah, you live and you learn, right? So now 2.0
Oh,
has a gas-powered heater, right? Oh
exactly.
my goodness.
Which is coming
Yes.
in handy.
Oh man, that's a good story. My cheeks hurt from laughing just now, so thanks. Did you do anything financially to plan for making this purchase? Was it a pretty big purchase? You'd been spending money on rent and now you just had to make an upfront buy. Were you just responsible
Yeah.
and had a savings? What was that like for you?
Yeah, pretty much. So I'd been, at that point, been working for, a number of years in different sort of marketing manager roles and then on my own in my business, but still, full-time work while still, flatting. So, rent was still like relatively low. So I'd been able to save up a bit of money. And so I had, at the time that I made that decision, I had saved up enough so that I could comfortably buy the van and spend a summer living without income. And so that was the original plan, like to take this like summer off and just live off savings. And then the way it all kind of worked out and things fall into place when you're doing the right thing. And I ended up being able to work remotely. So I didn't even have to use, those savings that I had put aside for that. And then that's why, one of the main reasons why I'm still doing it, right, is because I was able to figure out a way to work remotely so I can make money while traveling and being on the road. But yeah, initially it was, the van was definitely from savings and there were enough savings to go for a few months
Yeah,
without
that's awesome.
income.
And that's awesome how it all worked out because this was before the whole world was under lockdown and no one was allowed to work from an office.
Yeah.
This is a few years before COVID. So the fact that you're able to work remotely is so
Yeah.
awesome. I love that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm, count my blessings every day about my work situation. Like I work really hard. Everyone who's ever worked with me knows that, but I'm also very happy to admit that I've kind of just been lucky with how, some things have fallen into place. I look back now sometimes like, man, it's like, it's like I've been preparing for van life my whole career when the idea, only kind of came up 4 years ago. But some of the decisions I made was like, I was actually preparing for this. So maybe
Yeah,
unconsciously, I always knew this was
that's
coming.
awesome. Did you know anyone? Did you have any role models that you were sort of following in terms of van life? I mean, sometimes there's social media people that you sort of connect with in a way or connect with their story. Was there anyone in your life that was doing something similar?
No, not at all,
That's
and this
so
is why
amazing.
it was, like, such a random thing, and yeah, I still don't know where the idea came from. Like, after I had the idea, and I remember, like, when I bought the van, I started to follow some other van lifers here in New Zealand, but yeah, I honestly don't. One person sort of that's always kind of been an inspiration, and especially through that phase, is a writer called Tania Aebi, who wrote a book called Maiden Voyage, which is her story of sailing around the world. It's an old book. It must have been, because I first read it when I was like 16, so it must have been around for ages. But basically, she, I think, finished, I don't know if it was school or college, and didn't know what to do with her life. So that I can relate to that. And her dad gave her a choice and said to her, either you go and get an education, get a degree or something, or you go and you sail around the world.
Wow, what a cool dad.
And so she yeah. So she went off and she sailed around the world in this, fairly small boat with very, very little sailing experience. And it's an amazing book. Like, I still remember the first time I read it, I was just like gone for a weekend and I was reading this book. But I remember when I had, when I was going through this whole what am I going to do with my life phase, I reread the book, and that was sort of, it's like, hey, if this person who has very little sailing experience can go sail around the world on her own, then I can do, these sort of things. Like, sure, I can, set off in a van or do something crazy. So that was a bit of an influence for me. But yeah, there's no one in my life who's doing van life. So I have no idea where the idea came from.
I love it. And that's so awesome. Yeah, I think it's really important to even books and people
Mm,
that have chased their dreams or taken a risk, just looking at their story can just be so inspiring. And
mm,
that's one of the reasons why I have this podcast. I want to
mm.
help inspire people, to help them realize like it's not that difficult. You can make it happen. Yes, there are struggles along the way, but like you're going to come out a stronger person who knows how to experience difficult situations. So that's cool. I need
Oh,
to read
yeah,
that book for sure.
absolutely.
And were there any obstacles that you faced in planning this start? Any signs that you're like, maybe I shouldn't do this?
Nah, honestly, like, not at all, or not that I remember. I mean, I've been thinking about this, but I cannot think of anything. Like, everything was just falling into place at that time, and I was just yeah, I just knew I was doing the right thing, and there were obstacles, later on, but yeah, at the time, I was just other than, not knowing how to work my heater,
Yeah.
um, there were those little ones, just like figuring things out, and there is that sort of, um yeah, I think the best way to sort of put it is that fear of being misunderstood.
Mhm.
And that's actually something that's sort of been driving and influencing me quite a bit. And, the decisions I'm making, kind of going against the stream, going, a lot of my friends down here, and they're all very much on that sort of, traditional path, and they're all very happy with it, which is awesome, right? But so there's this whole like group of people that to me is family, because my own family is on the other side of the world, and they're all going through a transition in their life that was very similar, so they could all relate to each other really well. All the girls were talking about family and engagements, and that now having kids, and I wasn't part of that, and I didn't feel like it was part of what I didn't want to be part of that in that sense, right? Like, I still want to be part of the group, and I still am, and they're still very good friends of mine. But yeah, sort of like feeling sort of one step removed from your group of people, your family. that was quite hard. And then, yeah, just sort of that fear of people not getting what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Sort of thinking that, oh, she just doesn't want to work. She's lazy. She's just like not wanting to contribute, or, the other is like, oh, she can't find a guy. What's wrong with her? Which is, like, I don't want that, but it's hard to sometimes switch off those voices that people kind of judge you for the decisions you're making. So there was a lot of that going on, and there still is. I think it's part of most people's lives, right? But yeah, those were more sort of maybe the obstacles, but none of it was ever to the point where I actually considered not doing it. Like, I just knew this was just something I had to do.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens is you just know that it's something you have to do, and all those doors just seem to open, right? And it's like, just keep walking
Mm.
through, just keep walking through. Oh, this door closed. Okay, there's another door that's opening. So that's, I really like asking that question because most of the time people are like, I can't remember anything. All lights were green. It was go time.
And the funny thing is, like, sometimes then you look back and actually there were obstacles, but because you were so convinced you're on the right track, they didn't seem like big ones at the time. Whereas, the same sort of thing, like one, obstacle that I have, and you will experience this soon as well once you set off in your van. It's like van trouble. I mean, my one is hold on, almost 20 years old. So, you've kind of constantly got issues with them. There's always something. And, but and when I sort of, listed off like all the issues I've had over the last year, if I write up a list, I'm like, holy, it's just like everything's always going wrong. But in the moment, it just doesn't feel like that big a deal because it's just part of the lifestyle. And yeah, it's frustrating, but you get it fixed and you move on. So there are obstacles, but I think when you're doing the right thing, then overcoming the obstacles just you just do that and move on, and it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, you learn to accept that things are going to go wrong and
Hmm.
focus on finding a solution rather than focusing on the fact that there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, when you
Mhm.
started off on your journey, did you have an itinerary of places that you were going to go when you finally had the van and you were about to just have your have your adventure?
Yeah, I did actually that first summer. I think there was one part of the North Island of New Zealand that we call the East Cape that I'd never been to, and everyone been like raving about. So from the beginning, that was always sort of, I'm going to go and spend, a few weeks at the East Cape. I actually ended up going to the far north for a few weeks first over Christmas and New Year's because that's where all my friends
Surfing at
were
Shippies?
for that time. So
Yeah.
yeah, so caught up with all of them and had a great summer up there. But then yeah, headed down to the East Cape. And so that first summer I definitely had a bit of a plan. I still do, actually, to be honest. Most of the time I do have a plan. I often have, like right now is a perfect example. I sort of have a big picture plan, and then I kind of plan more on a, week by week kind of basis. And then sometimes I just change my plans completely because something else comes up. Or the weather is just really bad in one place and I'll, decide to go somewhere else. But a lot of the time I do have a bit of a plan where I want to go.
Perfect. Yeah. That's since I haven't started my van life journey quite yet, I'm building it out still. Everyone asks me, "Where's the first place you're gonna
Mm.
go?" And I'm like, "Gosh, I guess it just depends on when I get it done and what season we're in." But yeah, that's cool that you were able to kind of make an itinerary, sort of. It's nice to be flexible.
Yeah. And I find I kind of go through sort of different phases, right? There's times where actual travel is a huge part of van life, and I want to see places like right now, this summer, I'm doing a massive South Island road trip. I'd done, for the last 2 years, spent a lot of time on the North Island. So sort of, ticked everything off there, and was just really excited to come down to the South Island. And so right now, travel is a big part of it. I'm in a different place, every few days, and I get to, play tourist a lot, and then I see all these things and do all these cool things. But then there are other times where actually the travel isn't. Sometimes I actually stay put for a few weeks, or I still like travel, but there's actually other things. So it's not so much about seeing a new part of the country, but it's more about, having time to read more or ride or, do other things. So, I think van life isn't always like travel is a part of it, but I really, just enjoy it for the lifestyle and not just the travel as
Yeah,
well.
it is such a lifestyle. Do you chase
Mm.
conditions a lot? Like, are you going places because the wind is good or can stand up
Yeah,
paddleboard?
to be honest, like, yeah, I do, but not as much as I thought I would. So when I first started, that was a big appeal of it all. I could just like check the wind forecast and then go there, and I found that I don't actually do it as much as I thought I would. I do in sort of a smaller area, like for example, I was down in at the southern part of the South Island, and I sort of checked the wind and I saw there's some wind coming, and then I make sure that I'm at a beach that actually gets the kind of onshore wind you want for kite surfing. But I wouldn't have, driven like 5 hours in the other direction just for the chance to maybe get some wind. So it is sort of in a more local area. I do, but yeah, not as much as I thought I would. Interestingly,
Maybe because it's such a, like, spur of the moment kinda thing, you know? Like, you can't really plan out
yeah.
very far in advance because the conditions are always changing.
Yeah, and also because you go from, only having the weekends, while maybe sometimes the after work, opportunity over summer, but, say you only have a weekend, it's worth driving 3 or 4 hours, at times to get some wind to go kite surfing. But when you have the kind of flexibility, the urgency for me has changed, Now I find that sometimes even, when it's windy, I don't actually end up kiting, because I wanna do other things or, just don't feel like it on the day, and it's because I know, "Hey, if it's, windy again next Wednesday, then I'll just go." So you don't have that, having to do things on the weekend kind of pressure
Right,
anymore.
you have all this time now.
Yeah.
In New Zealand specifically, where do you typically stay? Are you staying you talked about freedom camping, and for those who don't know, that's basically camping off the grid, parking at a beach, making sure you leave no trace. And then there's holiday parks that you basically drive up to. You can pay for electricity if you want, plug into shore power, have a kitchen access, and other people around. What typically do you like to do?
It's a real mix of pretty much all the options. So in an average week, I'd probably freedom camp for a couple of nights. Depends on where I am. Like New Zealand's is somehow famous for this idea that you can just freedom camp anywhere you want, and that's totally not the case. So, if you're listening to this and you're planning on coming to New Zealand, just camp wherever you want. It does not work like that. But we do have, a bunch of spots where you are allowed to park up for free. Not all of them at the beach, but some of them are. So, usually spend some nights at those. And then campgrounds, to be the main reasons I stay at campgrounds is when I really want a long hot shower. Because even though I have a shower in the van with water tanks, you learn to shower very quickly. It's sort of the, get wet, shampoo, get shampoo out kind of situation. And sometimes it's just nice to stand under a hot shower for a few minutes. Um, or, you're just somewhere where there aren't a lot of good other options or that sort of stuff. And also, particularly this year, New Zealand tourism sector has taken a massive hit from COVID, obviously, and tourists gone. So, because I can afford it, I feel like I have a responsibility to support some providers. So I actually been spending more time at holiday parks this summer just to, support locals. Um, but then we also have sort of like the in between options, which is we have what we call DOC, the Department of Conservation down here, which have like parks where you pay, but it's basically just a field. It's usually in like really nice locations in the national parks, and there's like walks and hikes and stuff. So those, and then we have the New Zealand Motorhome Caravan Association, which has some properties where members can park over for like $3 a night. And then we've got some more and more actually, which is a really cool trend to see like private people allowing people to come and park over, some for free, some, take a donation or charge a bit. But yeah, so in New Zealand, we're super lucky. We actually got a bunch of options. And we've got a really cool mobile app where you can see all those options and, learn everything you need to know about them. So, yeah, it's a real, like, across the board situation for me. I did you find this interesting. So for my 3-year anniversary last December, I actually did the numbers and figured out how much I spent on average for, the equivalent of rent per week, which is, campgrounds and then memberships and stuff. And so for the first 3 years, on average, I spent 40 New Zealand dollars per week, which I think is about 30 US dollars, um, on, campgrounds and that sort of stuff. And, to be fair, I could do it cheaper. I just sometimes go for the
That's
luxury
still
option
so cheap
because,
because what would your rent be? You guys pay per week, so what would your rent be?
So if I was still, like, living in Auckland, and if you wanna have, like, a one-bedroom apartment, you'd be easily looking at $400, like, New Zealand dollars a week compared to, so I said 40 before, it's $48 a week that I spend, which adds up to about 30 US dollars. So, yeah, it's like,
Ugh, yeah,
ridiculous
that's
difference. And then I also, don't pay for power, and those sort of things. And yeah, I mean, I save so much
yeah,
money living this
yeah.
way. Absolutely.
What's that app that you find those places on?
So we've got an app here. It's called Camper Mate.
I used that,
It's New
yeah.
Zealand, Australian.
Yeah, that one's good. Cool. Yeah, because you were talking about people just renting out their land. I've done that already with my van, Guinevere. There's a site called Hip Camp, and people rent out their land, and it can be anything from basically a spot of grass to park in to like glamping in a yurt, you know? So it's like this wide range of stuff, but it's nice that people are renting out their own land for other people to enjoy, you know?
Yeah.
I know you've told me and you've said on your podcast that you're a little bit of an introvert in ways. Uh, so what's it like for you, like living van life? Is it like optimal because you don't really have to talk to too many people, or when you arrive to different campsites, like what's your routine with communicating and being social when you're actually in
Yeah.
your location?
Good question. So I'm definitely an introvert, not just a little bit. I know it sometimes comes with a negative stigma. I love it. It's one of my favorite things about myself, that I don't need other people to, be happy and entertain myself and provide stimulation. I'm just, perfectly happy just doing my own thing. I love that. So very proud introvert. How does it impact van life? It is a real advantage because you don't feel lonely, or I don't feel lonely. I can go days without talking to anyone. I do also find that van life's actually, I think it suits pretty much any kind of style, right? Because if you want to talk to people, you just go to, a campground or somewhere where there are other van lifers, and you just kind of do a casual, look around, and before you know it, you're chatting with people. I like that.
Van life community is so like welcoming. I mean, I wasn't even living in a van at this point, but I went to a campground in the States for a week, and most people were in vans or like, fifth wheels or little tow behinds. And everybody was just like, yeah, hey, you're one of us. So,
Oh, totally. Yeah, and I do enjoy that. You sort of, yeah, if I ever wanna talk to someone, it's easy to find, people to talk to. But I'm also someone who, sometimes sort of does the hermit thing and just sort of parks up and does her own thing, and I actually do that a lot. But, I think the downside of, or I think maybe an aspect of van life that introverts probably find a bit harder than extroverts, is this whole concept of you never control your environment. So no matter where you go, you're always in a public space, whether, you just never know what's going to happen. Whether you can go to the most remote campground, and all it takes is one other group who's having a party, and you're having a party, you know. So I think it's generally sort of the challenge of being an introvert, is that, for you to get what you want, you kind of rely on everyone else to play game and be on the same page with you. Whereas if you're an extrovert and you like, loud music and activity, then all you need is, you and your radio, and you can have a party. So I find that hard sometimes, this feeling of, yeah, always being at the mercy of other people to kind of get the peace and quiet that I crave a lot of the time. And yeah, but I talked to quite a few people about this, on my podcast and just people I meet as well. And I think van life is just one of those things that works for just about any personality because you can do it in so many different ways. And that's, isn't that cool? Like you can just, do it in whichever way you want to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, that is really cool. That's really encouraging to hear that too. Do you get lonely?
I do, but not in the I think it's loneliness, but it's not caused by being on my own. So, lonely and alone for me are very different things. I'm a lot more likely to feel lonely when I'm surrounded by people than I would
I
just on
agree.
my own.
Yeah.
Um so yeah. But the other thing I'd say that um if first of all, I've met some other travelers who, so we have a lot in common, we share this lifestyle, so that's always a go-to source, whether you can actually meet up in person or you just pick up the phone and have a chat with someone. And I've got, my other friends who are doing the traditional life are also all really supportive. So if I want to talk to someone, like there's always people to reach out to. There's online groups, in New Zealand, we've got a few, including one specifically for women traveling on their own. So, I bet with you, if I would put a message in there now and saying, I'm, in Tia now, feeling a bit lonely, would anyone be keen to catch up for a coffee or something? There's a good chance that, someone's around and you do. So yeah, I'm someone who doesn't feel lonely very often. But when I do, yeah, it's definitely not something that's a problem for me. Let me put it
Yeah.
that way.
And do you find those groups through Facebook? How do you find them?
Yeah, they're on Facebook. The ones that I'm part of, they're probably elsewhere as well, but that's, I guess, just the platform where I am, and so that's where I
Yep.
find them.
Do you miss your community back in Auckland? I know they've kind of started to spread out in different parts of the country.
Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about more lately. I definitely miss my friends up in Auckland, especially, right now. I left Auckland at the end of October, so it's been quite a while. My best friend's daughter had her first birthday last weekend, and they were all together and had a beautiful cake, and then I'm like, oh, I don't want to be there, and those sort of things. So I definitely miss them. But also, I think it's more than that. Like one of the I think downsides of van life, or I guess generally sort of the nomadic lifestyle, is that lack of community. And yes, you become part of a van life community or a, on the road community, which is really awesome. But it's not very stable and not very reliable because by definition, we're all travelers, we're all unreliable people, we're all hard to pin down.
Yeah.
Um, and sort of just the simple things like just, having your doctor, your go-to doctor, that you go to, your go-to grocery stores or, things like that. Like for me, everything is always new and always different. And you don't have, opportunities to like join, local groups or sort of make that connection with people to, for like I'm someone who doesn't make friends fast usually, so I need to spend time with people over and over again to really kind of get comfortable, and so you don't get that easily with van life, and it is something that I'm starting to miss more, and am sort of starting to think ahead a bit more, and it's like maybe that'll be the reason why I will at least have a base somewhere, so you kind of have your base and then you travel from there, but just to kind of have that go-to place where you have all your routines and your set community that you're part of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some I remember when I was working on the sailboat, that was like the one thing I wanted. I'm like, I wanna have roots somewhere. I want a community. I wanna be able to do things after work, live somewhere and work somewhere separate. So I totally understand how that is. Being in New
Mm.
Zealand, it's a pretty safe country. Is it safe being a solo female van lifer? Have you had any encounters that you felt uncomfortable? What's it like for you?
Yeah, I mean, we're so lucky down here in New Zealand in that regards. It is a really safe country. I mean, stuff happens down here as well, no doubt about it. There's bad people everywhere in the world. But yeah, so far, I mean, it's almost been 3.5 years now. I've never once been in a situation that I considered dangerous or risky. I've once decided not to stay somewhere at night just because I didn't feel comfortable. But that was, to be honest, just, mentally. It was a rainy day and it was gray and gloomy and I was in the middle of nowhere that I didn't know. So, it probably was perfectly safe. I just didn't, was just feeling a bit on edge. So decided to move on. But yeah, no, I mean, no issues. But I would say that I am probably also quite smart about it, and I sort of don't take unnecessary risks and, avoid certain, places at night and that sort of stuff. But yeah, very safe country down here, luckily.
Do you have any weapons? Do you have things that you protect yourself with?
I mean, I've got like kitchen knives and stuff, right? But I'm part of this woman van lifer group on Facebook that is like international, and the majority seem to be Americans. And I remember after I joined that, and when the safety conversation comes up, right, and people would say it's like, "Oh, I've got a gun," and I honestly thought they're joking. Like for quite a while, I thought that must be a joke because in New Zealand, we don't have weapons, you know? We don't carry weapons. Like, I mean, I've got I've got my kitchen knives and stuff that I guess I could use. What I do have, and I recommend to people, I've got a personal locator beacon, um, which I use, when I go hiking and do other stuff on my own. But it's also super handy in the van if I'm ever parked up somewhere where there's no cell phone coverage, and something would happen. I feel attacked or whatever, then I would set off the beacon, and it would send an emergency signal, a distress signal, so help would get there pretty much as quickly as help could get there. So that's sort of, my backup. But yeah, we don't do weapons
Yeah.
down here.
My the States, yeah. Things are just totally different up here. One of the reasons why I started training jujitsu was my brother's like, "You're gonna be living in a van down by the river. You need to know how to defend
Mm.
yourself." So, yeah, I like how safe New Zealand is.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think though that the other thing that I probably benefit from it, and you know me, so you can probably, agree with this. I do have a bit of a don't mess with me aura around me. So that probably helps as well. I don't look like an easy target.
On another topic, have you had any defining moments? Maybe it was when Josie broke down and you had to say goodbye to Josie, or like struggles that came up where you just decided you had to push through and keep going, that you weren't going to let that stop you from continuing on.
Yeah, definitely. So the first van, Josie, breaking down and losing her essentially was a big one. And at the time it was really stressful because obviously quite a financial issue, for quite a while I didn't know what was going to happen because there were ongoing issues with insurance companies involved, and a claim with a garage who'd overlooked issues, and so there was like several months where I didn't know, am I going to have to replace the van completely, or can it be fixed? And then once it was clear that it couldn't be fixed, who's going to actually pay for the damage? Do I have to pay for all of it, or will I get some money from insurance and whatnot? So it was a very stressful time. But at no point, like the one thing I knew throughout was that I'm gonna get a new van and I'm gonna continue. And that was really cool because it sort of, just confirmed that I'm doing the right
Yeah.
thing, and I'm on
And
the
you
right
make the
path. Yeah.
decisions that you need to keep going. You don't let that like paralyze you, the fact that things are going wrong. It's like, okay, well, I guess I better start looking.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are some of your proudest and sweetest moments of the journey so far?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think it's the sort of it's all the little things, all the things I get to see, the people I get to meet, the experiences I have. Just honestly, like I like so often I have these moments where I'm like, I just this is my life. Like how amazing, like how lucky am I? Like this is actually my life, and I'm living it every day. And it's often like little things that set it off. Just an awesome view, on a sunny day, or that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's the little things. The other thing, of course, for me is that like living this life led to me having an opportunity to make a dream come true, which is write a book and get it published. So that's been a huge deal for me and something I'm really proud of. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't made the decision to move into a van. But yeah, predominantly it's really the little things. The other thing that I honestly that such an highlight is kind of just the getting the opportunity to share stories, hear stories, connecting with like-minded people, to sort of realize that while I might be, doing things a bit differently, I'm definitely not the only one. There's a lot of people who asking themselves the same questions and, have the same sort of doubts and challenges, and that's been huge, and I've loved having had the opportunity to connect into that community through my blog and my podcast, and but also just people you meet on the road. Yeah, just love that.
So tell me a little bit about your book, your podcast, blog. Like what are your intentions with those? What are your purpose?
So it all started with a blog, and that is just I love writing, and it's kind of my default. Like whenever I think about, something I want to do, sort of usually the second thing is, oh, I should write about that. Um and and then when you write about it, there's something nice about sharing it as well. And I often sort of feel a bit like I'm not actually very good in conversations. Like I never feel like, I'm doing a very good job getting my point across. But when I write, I do. And whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But it sort of gives me that feeling of actually having a chance to really share a perspective or a point. And my blog it is about van life, but it is probably more so about my self-discovery journey, as I call it, and the sort of more emotional side of doing life differently and what it's like to swim against the stream, and sort of the things I learn and realize along the way. So that's kind of how the blog started. And yeah, that was just sort of I'm doing this, I got to write about it. It's just the default. The book kind of was a bit different. It was sort of it's the perfect example of what can happen when you create space. So it's this, the book's called One Size Does Not Fit All. It's about finding happiness by getting to know yourself, learning about your personality and values and strengths and weaknesses, and using that to build a life that is right for you. So it's very much based on my own experience and that journey, what I talked about before, that ball rolling in slow motion for, years and years. The book is about trying to help people to, make the ball roll a bit faster for them so they can maybe, get there and it doesn't quite take a decade and a half. And it's just been this idea and concept that I think been on my mind for a long time. But then living in a van, having time, having space, gave it the opportunity to really turn into something. And before I knew it, the idea turned into an actual outline, and then, chapters and words, and I had a book, and yeah, it was pretty incredible. It just kind of wanted to come out. You know what I mean? It's like just something that was inside of me that wanted to come out. So that's the book. And then the podcast is yet another different story. So, among other things, I write for a travel magazine down here. And I write about, my own trips, but I also write about other travelers I meet. And so I would meet these travelers and I'd interview them and then write up their story. And I love doing that. But it was so funny because I always sort of afterwards thought, like, actually, the interview is better than my story, because a lot of it gets lost in translation, and there's only so much you can put into like a 1,000-word article. And I was like, how cool would it be if I could actually share the interviews with people rather than just the stories? And that's where the idea for the podcast came from, right? There's so many people out there who have just amazing stories. And I wanted to hear those, I wanted to share them. And selfishly, so I love having these like deep and meaningful conversations about, values and happiness and what motivates people. But you can't have those conversations with someone you met at a campground 5 minutes ago. You can't sort of go over and be like, "Hi, I'm Lisa." It's like, so what, drives you in life, and what are your dreams? And you know,
I was just talking
you just
about
can't
this.
really get
Yeah,
away with
yeah.
it. But if you reach out to someone who's doing really awesome stuff and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing this podcast and I'd love to hear your story," you kind of have that excuse to ask a total stranger about their dreams and motivations and fears and uncertainties, right? And that's what I love about the podcast.
Yeah, that's what I've discovered so far. I think it's awesome
Mm,
everything that you're doing. And yeah, I one of my friends is like, "Wow, like you ask such great questions. Like they're so deep." And I'm like, "The funny thing is, I would never just ask you these questions, but because it's a
yeah.
podcast, I this is the format. This is what's gonna happen, you know? So, yeah, it's such a having a podcast is such a great way to just, like, dive super deep with somebody who
Mm,
you maybe have known for years and years and just never even asked these questions, or somebody brand new that you're just like, "Wow, you're super cool. Like, tell me about yourself. Tell me everything."
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So,
So
yeah.
fun. Okay, so I have a lot more questions for you, but I know I know this interview is kind of running long. So I'm just gonna pick 2 or 3 more
See,
questions.
this is the hardest thing about podcast is keeping them on
Yeah.
time. Because when you start hearing people's stories, it just goes on and on. I know
Yeah.
that.
So what sort of fears do you currently have? And
Um, I think a lot of them are internal fears that actually probably have very little to do with my lifestyle. And just that sort of old fear that I think, especially a lot of women can probably relate to around am I enough? Am I good enough? Am I fit enough? Am I fast enough? Am I smart enough? Am I, you know, so those are there. I don't know if that's like, yeah, I don't think it's got anything to do with van life. I probably would have the same fears, maybe even more so, because van life's definitely kind of helped me be a lot more confident in who I am and just a lot more this is my life. I love
yeah,
it. Deal with it.
yeah, pursuing
Um,
your
a
dream
fear that I
brings
have,
that confidence.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. A fear that I have that is sort of van life related is about something stopping me from being able to do this. So I love my independence and my freedom. And I sometimes I don't think about it. Sort of whenever the thought comes, I kind of push it away because I can't really do anything about it anyway. But something sort of taking that away from me. The most the scenario that as an example comes to mind is some kind of medical issue, whether it's an accident or something else that would require you to have help where you can't live on your own, let alone on your own in a van. And or yeah, something goes horribly wrong on the work front and I for whatever reason can't find new clients that I work for remotely. Or yeah, so I've got like a fear of not being able to take care of myself to the point where I can live this free and independent life. I'd hate to be I'd always feel like a burden on other people if I would need help in the long term. So that's something I'd find really, really hard and definitely worry about, but then just push it away because accidents happen. You can't really prevent it. So just
Yeah.
enjoy life while you
Yeah.
can.
Deal with it when and if it happens, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I so want to ask you like all these questions. Let's just wrap up. Lisa, if you hadn't have chased van life, pursued van life and bought Josie, what sort of regrets do you think you'd have and how do you think your life would be different?
Yeah. I don't know. So I do think that I am someone who has sort of that ability to make the most out of whatever situation she's in. So I actually can see myself be very happy with a very different life. So I think if I hadn't done van life, I probably would be still quite career focused. I might have started a tech startup or something and just be very invested, very passionate and motivated about that. So I can sort of see that as a path. I'd have a lot of money and have designer handbags and shoes and fancy trips and all that stuff that doesn't actually matter to me. But Yeah, so that's sort of what maybe my life would be, and regrets, I think regrets is a funny thing, like, I kinda choose not to have regrets, because there's no point. Even if I might look back and I say, "Oh, I wish I had done that and that," but you just don't know what would have happened if you had taken the other choice, and things might be even worse, right? So, yeah, I just don't wanna have regrets, and I just choose not to have them.
Yeah.
I do, sometimes regret things like, little things, but not the big things.
Yeah, I think everything happens for a reason, and it's
Mm,
what you make of the experience, whether it's good or bad. I think that's where regrets can come
exactly.
from. Do you have a dream spot, a place that you go that dreams just sort of start forming?
Like a mental
Mhm.
place.
Like, one of my friends goes hiking, and when she's in that
Ah.
environment, her brain just start dreaming.
Yeah, raw nature. So, removed from any kind of civilization noise and lights and all that stuff that comes with it. Definitely, yeah. Whether it's hiking or, just being at the beach, being out on the water, paddleboarding on a super calm, glassy lake in the morning, those sort of things. Recently transitioned from being very much an ocean focused person to now I enjoy hiking. So now I got to split my time between the ocean and the mountains. So now it's just nature.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah.
nature does that for me too.
Mm.
Okay, and my last question, I know I said I only had 2 left, but obviously I really enjoyed talking to you. What else would you like to share with my listeners that would encourage them to chase their dreams, take risks so that they can conquer their fears and live fearless and free?
Just do you. That's my number one advice, and that's kind of the philosophy behind everything I do and everything I am and everything I want, people around me to do and be and just be you, and honestly, if you don't know who you are, then spend a bit of time figuring it out. Whether you do that through reading or podcasts or talking to people or doing a course or going on some kind of self-discovery adventure weekend or whatever it is, but honestly, like, knowing yourself is the most powerful thing in the world. And then once you know who you are, just do you. I always say, as long as you're happy and no one else gets hurt, just do whatever you want to do, right? You don't want to hurt other people, so you got to consider that. But just be authentic and be honest, and figure out how you can live your life in a way that suits you and your personality. Yeah.
I think that's great. Lisa, thank you so much. This is so much fun. I feel like I'm in New
Thank
Zealand.
you.
We're talking on video right now, and I feel like I'm just sitting across from you inside your van looking at your little containers of sand.
I wish.
Me too.
I
New
wish you were
Zealand, let
here.
me in. So you can find Lisa. She has a blog called Life Done Differently, and that's lifedonedifferently.com. And then
Yes.
she has her Life Done Differently podcast, and that's put on all platforms. She interviewed me. That episode is up there. Thanks for that, by the way. That was so
Yes.
much fun. And then her book is called One Size Does Not Fit All. And you can find that on Amazon.
Yep, and all the major bookstores and Kindle and, yeah, should be easy enough to find.
Awesome.
And if you wanna get, jealous of amazing New Zealand photos and scenery, then find me on Facebook or Instagram, Life Done Differently NZ,
Yes.
and you get to see the most beautiful country in the
And for
world.
those of you wondering what the last letter she just said was, it's NZ or NZ, as they say in New Zealand.
For New Zealand.
So awesome. Cool. Well, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And thanks just for being authentically you and sharing your dreams
Mm.
with us. I love it. And you're one of my inspirations. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Awesome. It was awesome chatting with you. Always love chatting with you. But yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to share my story and be on the other side of the microphone for a change, which was a bit weird, but
So much fun. Cool. Thanks, Lisa.